There are artists who simply perform, and then there are artists who live their music. Gladys Knight is undeniably the latter. For more than 7 decades, her voice has carried the weight of real experience, the kind of joy, sorrow, faith, and resilience that cannot be manufactured in a recording studio. Now, as she approaches her 81st year on this earth, the world is getting a clearer picture of who Gladys Knight truly is, not just as a singer, but as a woman, a mother, a survivor, and a soul who has weathered storms that would have broken most people. And it is her son who has finally helped pull back the curtain on everything we long suspected about this extraordinary woman. But to understand what her son has confirmed, we must first understand where this journey began. Because Gladys Knight's story does not start on a stage. It starts in Atlanta, Georgia, in a warm family home, in a church pew, and in the heart of a little girl who discovered at an impossibly young age that she had something rare and precious inside her. Gladys Maria Knight came into the world on May 28, 1944, in Atlanta, Georgia. She was born to Merrill Woodlow Knight Sr., who worked as a postal worker, and Sarah Elizabeth Knight, née Woods. Growing up, Gladys was surrounded by siblings, a sister named Brenda, a brother named Merrill Bubba Knight Jr., and she also experienced the deep grief of losing a brother named David Billy Knight at a young age. From the very beginning, life for Gladys was never simple. It was layered with love, but also with loss. What set young Gladys apart was evident almost immediately. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, she began singing in her church choir, and it quickly became clear to everyone around her that this was no ordinary child's voice. There was a maturity to it, a depth, a humanity that transcended her years. By the time she was just 8 years old, on July 1st, 1952, she stepped onto the national stage for the very first time and won Ted Max, the original amateur hour television competition. She was 8 years old, and she was already a champion. That victory was not merely a cute childhood achievement. It was a prophecy. The story of how Gladys Knight and the Pips came together is one of those almost unbelievably charming accidents of fate that seems tailor-made for the history books. It was during her brother Bubba's 10th birthday party when a record player malfunctioned and refused to cooperate. Rather than let the music die, Gladys, Bubba, their sister Brenda, and their cousins Eleanor and William Guest simply began performing together on the spot. It was spontaneous, it was natural, and it was magical. Their mother, Elizabeth Knight, immediately recognized what she was witnessing. She encouraged the group to make it official. Drawing the name from their cousin James Pip, Wood's nickname, they became the Pips. They began entering talent competitions around Atlanta and winning with remarkable consistency. By 1957, their talent had attracted the attention of music industry professionals, earning them a record deal with Brunswick Records. The early years were not without struggle. The group did not chart with Brunswick, and by 1959, the label had let them go. Brenda Knight and Eleanor Guest chose at that point to step away from the group to start families. In their place came Edward Patton and Langston George. The group was evolving, reshaping, growing stronger. In 1961, they recorded a song called Every Beat of My Heart, written by Johnny Otis. That recording eventually reached number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100. The group had found their footing, and they rechristened themselves Gladys Knight and the Pips. A legend had officially been born. What the world saw in those early years was a dazzling, harmonious group delivering music that felt like it reached straight into the chest and rearranged something vital. What the world did not see was what Gladys was carrying off stage. At just 16 years old, she married her high school classmate and fellow singer James "Jimmy" Newman, a young man from Atlanta. She was pregnant at the time, and the couple faced that reality together with the optimism of youth. Tragically, her first pregnancy ended in a miscarriage, a heartbreaking experience for anyone, let alone a teenager navigating the beginning of a professional music career simultaneously. Despite that early grief, the couple eventually welcomed 2 children, a son, James "Jimmy" Gaston Newman III, born on August 13, 1962, and a daughter, Kenya Maria Newman, born in November 1963. But the marriage was deeply troubled. James Newman struggled with substance addiction, a burden that placed an enormous and ultimately unsustainable strain on their family. By the time Gladys was 20, he had left. The couple remained legally married for several more years before officially divorcing in 1973. James Newman passed away not long after the divorce, closing a chapter of Gladys's life that had been filled with as much pain as it had hope. During the most difficult period of that marriage, Gladys made a choice that reveals everything about her character. While the Pips continued to perform and tour, she stepped away from the spotlight entirely to raise her young children. She chose motherhood over stardom without hesitation. It was a quiet sacrifice, one that few people in the music world ever acknowledged, but one that defined who she was as a person far more than any Grammy Award ever could. In the early 1960s, Gladys, James Newman, and the Pips relocated to Detroit, settling in the Sherwood Forest neighborhood on Sherborne Road, a well-regarded community on the west side of the city. Gladys enrolled her children in Gesu Catholic grade school, committed as always to ensuring they had every possible advantage in life. Following her divorce from James Newman in 1973, Gladys found love again. In 1974, she married Barry Hankerson in Detroit. Hankerson would later become known as the founder of Blackground Records, the label that would go on to sign his niece, the beloved R&B icon Aaliyah. During the time of their marriage, Hankerson served as executive assistant to Coleman Young, the mayor of Detroit. On August 1, 1976, Gladys and Barry welcomed a son, Shauna Ollie Hankerson, into the world. But the marriage was troubled from the start, and by 1979, it had ended in divorce. What followed was a custody battle that drained Gladys emotionally and financially. And then, in 1979, the unthinkable happened. Shauna Ollie was taken, kidnapped amid the custody dispute. The anguish of a mother searching for her child is almost impossible to put into words. Gladys spared absolutely nothing in her pursuit of her son, reportedly spending over $1 million in her desperate search. The experience was one of the most devastating of her life. These were the stories that happened behind the music, behind the sequin gowns, and the standing ovations. And it was precisely these kinds of battles that gave Gladys Knight's voice its singular emotional power. Throughout the 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s, Gladys Knight and the Pips were an absolutely dominant force in American music. They signed with Motown Records in 1966, where despite being initially treated as a secondary act, they managed to produce a string of remarkable recordings. In 1973, they made the pivotal decision to move to Buddah Records rather than re-sign with Motown, and the results were extraordinary. Their Grammy Award-winning recording of Midnight Train to Georgia became a genuine American classic, reaching the #1 position on both the pop and R&B charts in 1973. It was followed by a wave of major hits, including I've Got to Use My Imagination, The Way We Were / Try to Remember, and Best Thing That Ever Happened to Me. The group boasted an astonishing 11 #1 R&B singles and 6 #1 R&B albums. Their success was not a flash in the pan. It was a sustained, decade-spanning dominance rooted in genuine artistry. Gladys also demonstrated her breadth as a solo force. In 1985, she joined Dionne Warwick, Stevie Wonder, and Elton John on the landmark AIDS benefit single, That's What Friends Are For, which reached #1 3 times and won a Grammy Award for Best Pop Performance by a duo or group with vocal. In 1989, she recorded License to Kill, the theme song for the James Bond film of the same name, which reached the top 10 in both the United Kingdom and Germany, further cementing her international reputation. In 1991, she released her third solo album, Good Woman, which immediately climbed to #1 on the R&B album chart. Rolling Stone magazine has recognized her as one of the 100 greatest singers of all time. She has received the National Medal of Arts and the Kennedy Center Honors, the latter presented by President Joe Biden in 2022. She and the Pips are members of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Georgia Music Hall of Fame, and the Vocal Group Hall of Fame. Across her career, she has won 7 Grammy Awards, 4 as a solo artist and 3 with the Pips. 2 of her most beloved recordings, I Heard It Through the Grapevine and Midnight Train to Georgia have been inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. The accolades, as staggering as they are, only begin to tell the story. There is a chapter of Gladys Knight's life that she has spoken about with extraordinary courage, because it would have been far easier to keep it hidden. For approximately a decade, Gladys battled a gambling addiction that had a significant grip on her life. In the late 1980s, she suffered a loss of $60,000 in a single night. Rather than retreat further into denial, she took an honest look at herself and made a decision. She sought help and joined Gamblers Anonymous. That step, that singular act of courage and self-honesty, changed everything. Breaking free from addiction is never simple, and it is never quick. But Gladys did it. She faced one of the hardest truths a person can face about themselves and came out the other side stronger, clearer, and more grounded than before. It is the kind of victory that does not earn a trophy. There is no Hall of Fame for personal redemption. But those who love Gladys Knight know that this chapter of her story is every bit as remarkable as any Grammy Award she has ever received. Gladys Knight's spiritual journey is one of the most deeply personal dimensions of her story. She was raised in the Baptist tradition and later embraced Catholicism. Then, in 1997, a significant transformation occurred. Following the lead of her own children, who had made the decision to leave Catholicism and join the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Gladys converted to the LDS faith herself. Her involvement with the church quickly became meaningful and active. In one memorable story, she half-jokingly suggested to church president Gordon B. Hinckley that the congregational singing could use a little more spirit and enthusiasm. To her amusement and delight, he agreed, and the result was the creation of the Saints' Unified Voices Gospel Music Choir, which Gladys founded and directed. The choir went on to record an album called One Voice that earned a Grammy Award. Additionally, Gladys took on a leadership role directing the B1 choir during a significant anniversary celebration in LDS history. Faith became, for Gladys, not just a religious label, but a genuine way of living, of making meaning out of loss, of finding purpose after hardship, and of serving others with her gifts. In 1999, Gladys Knight experienced a grief that no Grammy Award, no standing ovation, and no faith could make easy to bear. Her son, Jimmy Newman, the same child she had stepped away from her career to raise, the young man who had grown up and become her manager through his company Newman Management, Incorporated, died suddenly of heart failure on July 10, 1999. He was 36 years old. Jimmy left behind his wife, Micheline, and 5 children, daughters Nastasia and Gabrielle, and sons Rishan, Stefan, and Sterling. The loss hit Gladys and the entire family with devastating force. Jimmy had been one of the most consistent and trusted presences in her professional life. Losing him meant losing a son,